Hey party people, I'm Pastor Leah Scholl from Wake Forest Baptist Church, and I'm really grateful you've joined me today. We are in the midst of a sermon series called Unraveled, Seeking God When Our Plans Fall Apart. And today's reflection is about Job, and it's about Job seeking understanding when everything has unraveled. So be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Y'all know I love being a pastor, right? I really love it. I love finding ways to serve. I love preaching. Well, I love preaching when I'm not preaching to a camera. I love that you will share your scariest moments with me and your most proud achievements. I love getting to love you because you let me know you. Yep, I love being a pastor. But there's one really scary part of it. I have heard it called the making meaning part of it. That part when you call me up and say, Pastor, this really terrible thing has happened to me. Why did God make this happen? Or even worse, you say, Pastor, during this really terrible time, I couldn't find God. Why couldn't I find God? Or even worse, the very worst, when you say, Preacher, I couldn't find God. I don't think God loves me. You know the worst thing about all this? It is that the terrible things that have happened to you can make you believe that God is doing terrible things to you, that God has forgotten you, or that you have done such terrible things that God has abandoned you. Life can feel like that sometimes. In fact, some of you may be feeling that right now. Your situation, whether it's financial, physical, medical, situational, whatever it is, your situation may feel that way right now. I've had no fewer than 5 calls this week with terrible situations. And honestly, y'all, that was all on Monday. One former member called with mental health issues and asked me to pray for them. Another with a health scare and surgery. A couple of friends who are stuck in bed because the news is so bad. Another so fearful of the pandemic that she's having a tough time making decisions. And adding layer upon layer, there's Afghanistan, there's Haiti, there's the Delta variant, the news about climate change, the fake bomber in Washington, D.C. It feels like too much. And I wonder, is God doing terrible things to us? Has God forgotten us? Or even worse, has God forsaken us? I'm sure that's how Job felt. Remember, he had lost everything. His wealth, his health, his family, his children, and all of his friends, frankly, were judgmental jerks. And then we get to today's text. It's Job speaking about those same questions that we have about how to understand the world when everything unravels. And Job says, No one knows where to find wisdom, for it is not found among the living. He says it can't be bought, it can't be found, and only God knows the way. And ultimately, the fear of the Lord, or better yet, the awe of the Lord, is the true wisdom and forsaking evil. It is an easy answer to a tough question, though. It's really trust God and do the right thing. Or maybe it's a tough answer to an easy question. I don't really know. But what I do know is that instead of leaning into Job's answer, we often lean into other ones, worse ones, kind of mean ones. Let me introduce you to Kate Bowler. She's a professor at Duke Divinity School, a Canadian Mennonite, and an expert on what we call the prosperity gospel. And at age 35, with a very young son, she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. She says about us believers They wanted an escape from poverty, failing health, and the feeling that their lives were leaky buckets. Some people wanted Bentleys, but more wanted relief from the wounds of their past and the pain of the present. People wanted salvation from bleak medical diagnoses. They wanted to see God rescue their broken teenagers or their misfiring marriages. They wanted talismans to ward off the things that go bump in the night. They wanted a modicum of power over the things that rip their lives apart at the seams. Don't we all want that? And don't we especially want an easy answer for the problem of suffering? The prosperity gospel guarantees that faith will always make a way. Don't you want that? Even now, especially now? Those easy answers always include everything happens for a reason and God is writing a better story. And as Kate Bowler says, apparently God is going around closing doors and opening windows. Or maybe even some of us think, well, God needed an angel. Kate Bowler says, this one takes the case because A, it makes God look sadistic and needy, and B, angels are, according to Christian tradition, created from scratch, not dead people looking for a cameo in Ghost. You see how confusing it is when we just pretend that the deceased returned to help you and find your car keys and make pottery. We need better answers than that. And folks, many of us are saying the same things in our own heads, which is even more frightful than saying them to others. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but every one of us has suffered, are suffering, and will suffer. Suffering is the primary experience of being human. Did you hear that? Suffering is the primary experience of being human. The Buddhists say it best, all of life is suffering. And let's face it, only aging, sickness, and death are certain and unavoidable. Or as Ram Dass put it, we're all just walking each other home. Coping through suffering, y'all, is in some way what life is all about. And you know how to do this. You do it like this. Acknowledge your own suffering. Feel it. Don't believe the lies, whether in your head or from other people, that say you deserve suffering, or the lies about God that God has created the suffering especially for you. You are not that special, and neither am I. Resist chasing after pie-in-the-sky solutions to your suffering. And finally, if you can, find some good companions to go through it with you. And if it's not your turn yet, turn yourself to others who are suffering and be a good companion. Kate Bowler reminds us of some ways to be a good companion. Bring presence. Offer sincere affirmations to the person who is suffering. Offer good touch, hugs, hand-holding, touch that is consensual and non-creepy, that is. Listen deeply and don't try to fix. Just say, oh friend, that sounds so hard. And finally, just bring your presence and be quiet if you can. Yes, friends, it feels like the world is falling apart because, well, it is. I know that it's hard. I know also that you are strong, loving people. If I could, I'd give all of y'all a big hug. I'm here. Reach out to me if you need me. I love you, and I love being your pastor.